You know the type. That person who's dazzlingly smart, effortlessly charming, and always seems 2 steps ahead. You're captivated by their wit, the sheer speed of their mind. They dismantle arguments with surgical precision and offer insights that feel profound. But when you walk away, you're left with a strange unease, a feeling that their charm was less of a gift and more of a tool. You weren't part of a conversation. You were a piece on a chessboard. That feeling is your intuition picking up on something real. The pioneering psychiatrist Carl Jung gave us a framework for understanding this. He taught that everyone has a shadow, the unacknowledged, repressed, and often darker part of our personality. A theme consistent with his work is that a bright light can cast a dark shadow. For highly intelligent people, this shadow doesn't just lurk. It learns, it adapts, and it can become a powerful, invisible weapon. We tend to think of intelligence as a clear-cut positive. It builds bridges, cures diseases, and solves complex problems. But what if that's only half the story? What if that same cognitive horsepower can be used to construct elaborate cages for others? Cages built of words, logic, and emotional manipulation. A core concept from Carl Jung is that the parts of ourselves we refuse to see, well, they don't just vanish. They fester in our unconscious, gaining strength in the darkness. For most of us, these shadow traits, our insecurities, selfish impulses, or latent aggression, are messy and leak out in obvious ways. But for someone highly intelligent, the shadow can look different. It can be refined, polished, and disguised. Their intellect becomes a powerful shield, not just for hiding these traits from others, but for hiding them from themselves. They can build such compelling justifications for their behavior that they genuinely believe their own story. They aren't just deceiving you. They're masters of self-deception. This is where dark psychology gets incredibly subtle. It's not the open aggression of a bully. It's the silent, calculated influence of a chess master who sees you as a pawn. In this video, we'll use Jung's profound framework as a lens to uncover 7 subtle shadow traits he warned us all to look for. These are the traits that can allow sharp minds to hide their manipulative intentions in plain sight. This isn't about making you paranoid. It's about making you discerning. It's a tool for protecting your own mind. So, let's see what can lurk in the shadows of a brilliant mind. First up is what we can call the overdeveloped and weaponized persona. Drawing from Carl Jung's work, the persona is the social mask we all wear. It's the version of ourselves we present to the world. You know, the good employee, the loving partner, the confident leader. We all need one to get by. But Jung warned that problems start when a person mistakes the mask for their actual face. For some, the persona isn't just for social harmony, it's a fortress. For an intelligent manipulator, it goes a step further. Their mind allows them to build a persona that isn't just functional but flawless. They study people, understand social dynamics, and craft a public identity designed to charm, disarm, and gain trust. This could be the humble genius, who downplays their intelligence to seem more approachable, or the endlessly empathetic listener, who mirrors your every emotion to build a quick, intense rapport. Here's how it becomes a weapon. The manipulator, you see, uses this perfect persona to create a stark contrast with their true aims. Their behavior is so positive, so sound, and so appealing that it just feels impossible to question their motives. If you feel even a flicker of doubt, you're likely to dismiss it yourself. How could someone so brilliant and kind really have a malicious agenda? You're interacting with a character, and your mind just wants to believe the story. And the real telltale sign? It's that feeling of interacting with a performance, not a person. Their charm? It just feels recited. Their empathetic responses, while perfectly worded, somehow lack genuine warmth. You might notice their stories always circle back to reinforcing their desired image. There's a subtle hollowness behind the eyes, a sense of cold calculation under that warm smile. You walk away impressed, yes, but strangely unseen, like you were just an audience member for their one-person show. This perfect persona is designed to lower your defenses when they later engage in more direct manipulation, like subtly undermining a colleague or gaslighting a partner. Their victims are trapped. If you try to call them out, they retreat behind the fortress of their persona, calmly explaining why you've misunderstood or why you're being too sensitive. The persona becomes their alibi, and your intuition? That's what goes on trial. The second trait is one of the most powerful tools in the manipulator's arsenal: sophisticated rationalization. We all make excuses. It's a basic defense mechanism. But in the hands of a highly intelligent person, rationalization becomes an art form. They don't just make a simple excuse. They construct a complex, logical, and seemingly moral argument for why their harmful behavior was actually the most reasonable choice. This is a direct result of a mind that worships logic, but won't acknowledge its own shadow. The shadow holds raw urges for greed, control, or advantage. An integrated person might feel these urges and choose not to act. But the intelligent manipulator's ego can't accept being driven by something so primitive. So their intellect isn't used to examine the shadow. It's used to serve it. The brain becomes a high-powered lawyer, hired by the shadow to argue its case. For example, imagine a manager who wants to steal a brilliant idea from a junior employee. They might first praise the idea, but then begin a campaign of subtle critique. They'll say things like, "It's a fantastic starting point, but it lacks scalability." They use their superior vocabulary to dismantle the employee's confidence. Then, weeks later, the manager presents a new proposal, which is the original idea, just wrapped in complex jargon and impressive data. They've rationalized the theft, saying, "I was inspired by the initial conversation, but I had to fundamentally re-engineer it. It's a completely different concept now." They may even believe it. Their self-deception is that complete. The telltale sign is feeling mentally exhausted after debating them. You go in with a clear sense of right and wrong, but you leave confused, uncertain, and maybe even convinced their twisted logic makes sense. They don't win by being right. They win by making the truth so convoluted that you just give up. Complexity is their smokescreen. This is a form of intellectual gaslighting that attacks your sense of reality. They aren't just trying to win. They're trying to rewrite the rules of the game itself. This brings us to our third trait, the projection of intellectual insecurity. You'd think a brilliant person would be secure in their intelligence, right? But for many, it's a throne they must constantly defend. Their self-worth, it's fused with being the smart one. And that creates a terrifying fear of being exposed as a fraud. Now, according to Jungian theory, projection is when we unconsciously take qualities we can't accept in ourselves, and we pin them on others. It's just easier to see a flaw in someone else than in the mirror, isn't it? So when an intelligent manipulator feels a pang of their own insecurity, they simply can't tolerate it. And so they project it. How does this show up? Often, it's as subtle, condescending put-downs. They use their wit not to illuminate, but to diminish. They're masters of the backhanded compliment. Something like, "That's a surprisingly insightful point for someone with your background." Their goal is to create a hierarchy, with them at the top, and neutralize you as a potential threat. Another sign, it's an obsession with pointing out minor logical fallacies in casual conversation. They aren't trying to find a better understanding. No, they're performing intellectual dominance. By constantly correcting others, they're externalizing their own inner critic, the one that whispers they aren't good enough. They make the world their classroom, and cast everyone else as an underperforming student. This leaves you feeling intellectually small. You hesitate to share ideas, for fear of being pounced on. The conversation feels like a test you're always failing. And this is the intended effect. Their goal is to manage their own insecurity by lowering your confidence. This behavior isn't a sign of their superior intellect. No, it's a symptom of their profound insecurity. Their need to belittle you isn't about you at all. It's a desperate attempt to silence the doubts in themselves. The fourth shadow trait is a chilling combination. It's calculated charm, paired with profound emotional detachment. Charm itself isn't bad. But in the hands of this kind of manipulator, charm isn't an expression of feeling, it's a technology. A highly intelligent person with this trait often has a keen, academic understanding of human emotion. They've observed what makes people tick, what builds trust. But they observe it like a scientist studying an ant colony. They learn the if-then statements of connection. Things like, if I mirror their body language, then they will feel heard. Or, if I reveal a minor, curated vulnerability, then they will trust me more. Because they aren't actually feeling the empathy they're projecting, they can deploy their charm with ruthless efficiency. You see this in the person who is incredibly warm and engaging with a superior, only to become icily dismissive to a subordinate moments later. The charm is switched on and off like a light. A classic example is the love bombing at the start of a relationship. They use their intelligence to understand you deeply and quickly. They learn your hopes and fears and then craft a persona that is the perfect answer to your needs. It's intoxicating, but it's a performance designed to secure your attachment. They aren't falling in love with you. No, they are acquiring you. The telltale sign is its perfection and speed. Real connection is, a bit awkward. Calculated charm, however, is seamless and fast. You feel an intense connection almost immediately, which, honestly, can be a red flag. Another sign is a subtle disconnect between their warm words and their cold, assessing eyes. You're left with a subconscious feeling of being hunted rather than loved. This trait, it weaponizes your need for connection. Once they have you hooked, they can withdraw affection just as quickly, leaving you confused and desperate to get back that perfect connection you had or thought you had at the very beginning. Recognizing that the initial charm was, a strategy. That's the key to breaking the spell. Deeper in the shadow, we find the fifth trait, which we might call a messiah complex. This is where the manipulator's ego and intellect combine to create a toxic form of self-perception. They don't just think they're smarter, they believe they are better. They see themselves as possessing a unique, superior understanding of morality and how the world should work. This is often a defense against deep-seated feelings of worthlessness. By creating a narrative where they are a misunderstood savior in a world of fools, they avoid confronting their own flaws. They construct elaborate ethical frameworks that, coincidentally, always justify their own actions while condemning others. You see this in the activist who talks about saving humanity but treats their own family with contempt. You see it in the guru who uses profound-sounding concepts to exploit their followers. They're so convinced of their own righteousness that they believe it gives them a license to lie, cheat, and dehumanize others. In their mind, they're serving a higher purpose. The ends justify the means. A common tactic is what some call spiritual bypassing, using spiritual or psychological concepts to avoid their own issues. If you're hurt by their actions, they might say you're stuck in your ego or projecting your own trauma. They use the language of healing as a weapon to invalidate your reality and maintain their moral superiority. They're the enlightened one. And you just don't get it. This leaves you with a sense of moral confusion. It makes you feel like your legitimate pain is a sign of your own spiritual failure. This grants the manipulator a license for cruelty, all under the banner of righteousness. Any philosophy used to systematically dismiss your pain and justify cruelty, it's not enlightened, it's a perversion. It's the shadow wearing a savior's mask. The sixth shadow trait is a highly destructive form of manipulation: intellectual gaslighting. Gaslighting is often about denying emotional reality, with phrases like, "you're overreacting." Intellectual gaslighting is more insidious. It uses logic, data, and complex arguments to dismantle your perception of reality and your trust in your own mind. The manipulator does this by exploiting your respect for expertise. They might use a tactic known as gish galloping. This is where they overwhelm you with a torrent of arguments, a mix of half-truths, red herrings, and complex but irrelevant points, so quickly that you can't possibly respond. The sheer volume of information then stuns you into silence, creating the illusion they've won through superior knowledge. Imagine you raise an ethical concern in a meeting. The intellectual gaslighter won't just say you're wrong. They'll launch into a monologue, citing obscure studies and complex theories. They might say, well, if you understood stochastic modeling, you'd see your concern, while well-intentioned, is based on a linear projection. You're left speechless, not because you're convinced, but because you're overwhelmed. You start to think, maybe I'm just not smart enough to understand. Another tactic is constantly reframing the past. They use their sharp memory to selectively retell events in a way that always casts them in the right. They'll remember the exact words you said 6 months ago, but conveniently forget the context. Because they present this with such confidence, you begin to doubt your own memory. The telltale sign is feeling crazy or stupid. It's a profound sense of cognitive dissonance. Your intuition knows something is wrong, but you're faced with a seemingly unassailable wall of logic that tells you your gut is mistaken. The goal is to destroy your cognitive sovereignty and make you dependent on their interpretation of reality. Protecting yourself requires a radical act of self-trust. It means holding on to your perception and saying, I know what I saw, I know what I felt, and I will not let you talk me out of my own reality. The final, and perhaps most chilling trait, is the exploitation of vulnerability through insight. High intelligence often comes with a powerful ability to see into the heart of other people, their insecurities, their wounds, and their dreams. In a healthy person, this insight leads to profound empathy and connection. But when this gift is held by someone with a dominant, unacknowledged shadow, well, then it becomes a weapon. The manipulator's insight isn't used to heal you, but to identify your vulnerabilities for exploitation. They see your deepest wounds, not as something to be handled with care, but as levers to be pulled, to control you. In the beginning, they encourage you to be vulnerable. They create a safe-seeming space, ask probing questions, and make you feel deeply understood. So you open up. You share your fear of abandonment, or your feeling of not being good enough. You're handing them the blueprint to your psychological operating system, and they're taking notes. Later, when they want to control you, they use that information against you with surgical precision. If you fear abandonment, they'll use the silent treatment, knowing it will trigger panic in you. If you feel intellectually inadequate, they'll use condescending language, knowing it hits your most sensitive spot. For instance, a person confides in their partner that their father was very critical and made them feel they weren't smart enough. The partner listens with apparent empathy. Months later, in an argument, the partner says coldly, for someone so worried about it, you're not proving your father wrong right now. The blow is devastating. They have taken the most private, vulnerable wound and deliberately pressed on it to win. The feeling this leaves is a sickening form of betrayal. It can make you feel foolish, forever trusting them, and make it incredibly difficult to be vulnerable with anyone again. This is the conscious and strategic use of intimacy as a weapon. Be wary of anyone who pushes for deep emotional disclosures very early on. True trust isn't built in a day. No, it's earned through 1,000 consistent acts of kindness. After exploring these traits, it's natural to feel uneasy. But the goal isn't to become paranoid. The true solution, rooted in Jung's work, isn't just about getting better at spotting the shadow in others. It's about becoming courageous enough to face the shadow in yourself. Jung famously said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The best protection against manipulation is truly understanding the parts of yourself that are susceptible to it. Why are you drawn to someone with a messiah complex? Is it perhaps because a part of you longs for a savior? Why do you fall for calculated charm? Is it because, well, your own need for validation is so strong? Integrating your own shadow means doing the hard work of self-reflection. It means admitting you have selfish impulses, moments of insecurity, and a capacity for rationalization. When you accept these things in yourself, you're no longer terrified of them. And when you're not terrified, you can spot them in others with clarity and detachment. When you've done this inner work, your intuition becomes finely tuned. You'll still meet that dazzlingly smart and charming person, but you will also feel that subtle unease. And this time, you won't dismiss it. You'll register it with calm awareness and think, something is not integrated here. You will create healthy boundaries, not from fear, but from profound self-respect. The brightest light to ward off the darkness of others is the light of your own self-awareness. So we've journeyed through this unsettling landscape of the intelligent shadow. From the weaponized persona to exploiting vulnerability, we've really seen how brilliant minds can sometimes hide dark intentions. The key takeaway isn't that intelligence is dangerous, no, but that unexamined intelligence, that's what truly can be. A great mind, when it's divorced from emotional and moral integration, well, it can become a tool for some really sophisticated manipulation. Now, the purpose here, it's empowerment, not fear. It's about learning to trust that quiet, intuitive whisper. You know, the one that tells you something just feels off, even when a loud, brilliant voice is telling you, "No, you're wrong." So now I'd really love to hear from all of you. What's one of the most subtle manipulative behaviors that you've ever encountered? By sharing your experience down in the comments, you can really help others learn to spot these patterns and feel a little less alone. Let's make this a library of shared wisdom. And if this exploration resonates with you, hey, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, okay? There's always more to learn, as we continue to make the darkness conscious.